Ramya. I'm the Director of Environmental Science for the Key Biscayne Community Foundation, and I run our Citizen Science program. Every third Thursday of the month, we usually have a lecture. This month, obviously, we had to push it to the fourth Thursday. But we usually have a lecture about some science-related topic or citizen science-related topic. And we just want to help everybody in the community learn more about what's going on in our island. Today, we have with us Tyler from Miami Waterkeeper, and I already forgot your title. You just told me. But I'll let him introduce himself. So with that, I'll hand it off to Tyler. There you go.
Awesome, thank you, Ramya. So yes, my name is Tyler Mominey. I am the Education Outreach Coordinator with Miami Waterkeeper. So just a little bit of background of us, and we'll get into it during this presentation as well. We basically protect the water you love. That's kind of our tagline from Miami-Dade County all the way up to Broward County as well. And here today, and first of all, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And I make sure I'll give you, this hour will be full of information, and you guys will be out there being water warriors after this. So this is our Thousand Eyes presentation. This is our training, and it really empowers you to be out there being water warriors, reporting pollution to us, really being our eyes on the water. As much as we want to be on the water every day, unfortunately we cannot, so we rely on all of you. So with that, I'll get started. Just a little bit of our history. So Miami Waterkeeper is part of the Waterkeeper Alliance. The Waterkeeper Alliance, it's a network of clean water advocacy groups started on the Hudson River. This is a good picture of kind of our history back in the 60s. And essentially what happened is, back in the 60s, we had some commercial fishermen up in the Hudson, and they got together. They started to see some decline in fish stocks. They started to see some dirty water, and they were trying to figure out what was happening, what was going on, and what they could do about it. Similar to some of what we're feeling right now. And essentially what they did is they got together, they formed the first Hudson River Keeper, which started the Waterkeeper Alliance, and they got together via the Clean Water Act. So you guys, some of you remember probably back in the 60s, the Clean Water Act empowered all of us to fight for our water, to fight for clean water, and gave us the power to do so. So that's what happened with this, and we are now an international organization running through several different countries and all over the United States. A little bit of background of Biscayne Bay, Miami Waterkeeper itself, and just the historic water flow here into Biscayne Bay. So if you look up there, we have the Kissimmee River. So Kissimmee River is historically where our water flow starts from the bay to go down to the bay, into the Gulf of Mexico, into the Florida Bay. So it starts up there in the Kissimmee River, comes down into Lake Okeechobee, then it flows through this kind of river of grass, so to speak, which is historically the Everglades. Now we know kind of those areas are all built up. Now, what's interesting is Biscayne Bay is actually an estuary. So an estuary, as you may know, is a mix of freshwater and saltwater. So we actually used to have, if you look at the picture on the right, we used to have freshwater streams, freshwater upwellings, where you could actually get water you could drink from. And there's actually some old stories like back in the day of pirates and settlers pulling fresh water and drinking water out of these freshwater upwellings in Biscayne Bay. Now, unfortunately, this does not happen anymore. If you swim in the bay, if you've tasted the bay, that doesn't happen. It's a lot more salty, and unfortunately, that's because we changed up the water flow. That's also because there's a lot of nutrients going into the Biscayne Bay, which is a little bit of what we're gonna get into today. This is an old newspaper. If you look at the article, we have top right, we have an old dredger, so dredging out, and this, if I got my sources right, this is actually for North Miami Beach. So it's them building up the beach, dredging out the canals, dredging out the intercoastal waterway, and up on the left is the same type of thing. That's a little bit more inland. Just kind of snapshot if you look in the middle. That's from North Miami Beach. That's how big and tall the mangroves used to grow. And they cut those all down. Obviously now we have development there. So moving towards our current water flow. Current water flow, obviously if you look, and it's kind of hard to see, down here where this lighter blue is, we actually have changed the whole water flow throughout the state of Florida. And you can see that throughout the canals. That's what those light blues are. Now, we also change it through something else. And you can't really see it on this picture, but obviously you have roads that either run parallel or run next to these waterways and these canals. So change the entire course. We don't have this river of grass anymore. We don't have this reloading of the Florida aquifer. We don't have this natural purification of the water as it runs down through the Florida watershed. If you look on the right, has anyone seen these before on the right? These water control systems, maybe. If you drive down 75, if you drive down Alligator Alley, I'm sure you'll see them. I've seen them myself. These are water control structures, and what those end up doing is actually controlling the water flow. That's how we've built all these canals, and they'll actually purge out water. Sounds good for humans, it's not so great for the environment. Part of that is because when you have these influxes of water, the pollution is very concentrated and it'll come out very quickly and very concentrated. So obviously not great, and as we can kind of see, most of these canals are ending up in the Bay or the Gulf of Mexico. So moving back towards our mission, back towards Miami Waterkeeper, so it's to ensure swimmable, drinkable, and fishable water for all. Now these three words, this kind of phrase might sound familiar, and it's from back what I talked about, the Clean Water Act. So it's really empowering all of us, and part of what we do is empowering all of you guys to really fight for the water that you love, fight for the water that's all near you, even if you don't live near the coast. It all affects you in some certain way. And we do that through a three-pronged approach. So it's community outreach and education. That's also our science-based research and our advocacy. And our program is actually split out through these three prongs. So as you can see, I'm part of the education and outreach team. That first prong, we have some scientists on board as well. And we have some people who are analyzing our politics happening right now, the lawmakers, and what's happening within the political advocacy. So 1,000 Eyes on the Water, to get back to what we're talking about here, it's our signature community program. This is actually our executive director at the Miami Waterkeeper, Rachel Silverstein. And what we've built this is, it's volunteer-based, it's citizen-led. This is really, again, empowering all of you to be out there protecting our waterways. A lot of people ask when they come up to me, how can you get involved? Everyone wants to be involved and can't figure out how, or maybe they don't want to do another beach cleanup, or maybe they don't want to do another invasive species removal. This is exactly how. So if you're out, people have put reports in from the water, from on their boats, from on their kayaks, but also walking along the beach. One of our pollution reporters actually walks every single morning, and we know because we get it about like 8:30 when he gets back from his walk, all of his pollution reports. So anytime you're near the water, anytime you know someone near the water, this is the program for you. And together we can cover kind of all of our waterways, make sure they're protected, ensure cleanable, drinkable, and fishable water for all. So again, who are the 1,000 Eyes on the Water? It's all of you. So 1,000 Eyes, 500 people. That was our original goal when we set forth not too long ago. We have luckily reached this goal. So maybe we should change the title and make it more than 1,000 Eyes on the Water. But essentially is all of you guys have reported, and we've gotten over thousands of reports that have actually led to legal action as well. So moving into our next agenda item, Biscayne Bay Habitats. And some of you, I'm sure, have seen all three of these, but we're going to go ahead and go over all as well. If you look here, it is a little hard to tell, but this is just a more detailed version of the map I showed before, with all of the canal systems and the change in the way we've changed all of our waterways here today. And you can see it starts up near Kissimmee, comes down into Lake Okeechobee. But now, instead of going straight down this river of grass that would be in through Central Florida in the historic Everglades, it's actually getting all diverted out. Obviously, that's causing lots of issues. It's spreading out the pollution in not so good of a way. It's concentrating the pollution, and that's affecting 3 different of our habitats, specifically here in Biscayne Bay. So obviously, number 1, we have the coral reefs. We'll talk about that one first. If you guys didn't know, Florida actually has the only continental barrier coral reef in the entire United States. That is actually new to me. I didn't know that. I've grown up here, I lived here all my life, and I found that out 2 years ago.
Does it happen in Hawaii?
In Hawaii?
Does it have a barrier reef in Hawaii?
So as far as the barrier reef, so we don't have a barrier reef in Hawaii. They have patch reefs. It's a little bit different, so it's contiguous. So it actually runs over 350 miles from south of Key West all the way up to about Port St. Lucie. So a little bit different, but there is reefs in Hawaii. And if you could see, this is, like we said, it runs all throughout. You could see our director, Rachel. She's diving here. Sorry about the quality. I'm not sure what happened here. During the Port of Miami dredging, over 200 acres of coral actually was covered in this sediment. So you could see here wiping off corals. So Rachel actually went down there, surveyed all these corals, and what happens is when they gain these sediments, they're over sedimented, they'll actually die slowly. So they need to be free living with not so much stuff in the water column that actually kind of chokes them, I guess is the best way to think about it. And you can see just how much sediment is all around. I want to say in this next clip she has a ruler to see how much the sediment is actually set forth. Now, what's cool and what came out of this is we actually set forth a lawsuit with towards the Army Corps of Engineers to actually mitigate this. So obviously dredging happened, we couldn't stop it, but there was no proposal, there was no consideration that all of these corals, over 100,000 corals, would be covered in the sedimentation and unfortunately die. Luckily, we've gotten them outplanted, we've gotten them kind of taken care of, but this is something that needs to be considered. This is something that is really important to us, especially considering we have only one barrier reef here in the United States. Next ecosystem we'll talk about, one of my favorite seagrass beds. So seagrasses, obviously food, shelter for various animals. They stabilize the soil and they actually trap carbon. So very important here. And a couple of the threats that we're going to look for is die-off from pollution. They are a plant. So if you've ever grown a plant, I've grown a plant. If you've ever killed a plant, due to nutrient deficiencies, due to over-nutrients, which is a lot of what happens in the bay, damage from boats as well, and also algal blooms. And if you look on the right, does anyone know what that is? That's actually prop scarring. So that's a photo from a helicopter, and you can see where the boats kind of ran around, turned around, and that actually disturbs all the seabed, and it takes a long time to not only grow back, but the animals within it are now separated.
So that was just a boat doing moves?
Yeah, so it's several different boats. You can kind of see where there's one circling, could be fishing, it could have been snorkeling, could have been just trying to get their boat out. These are runs through it, but you can see them actually even from space. This one's not as far up as space. And those take 10, 20, 30, 40 years to grow back. And what happens also is the species that live within it, the species that breed within it, sometimes don't recognize that it's not a contiguous seagrass area, so they'll stick within this little area. So let's say one that's right up here, they'll stick within that area, not knowing that just not so much further they can go and expand into the larger area, just because they need that protection. And we're also having, unfortunately, a seagrass die-off. So if you look right here, just to kind of place you, there's the Julia Tuttle Causeway. We have these huge seagrass beds. This was pictures from 2011, and this one actually is from space in 2016. So I'll do that one more time. From 2011 to 2016, we lost more than half of our seagrass. So that's very unfortunate. A lot of questions were asked of why this is happening. Why is this happening in 5 years? Why is this happening so quickly? Why is this happening in the bay? And if you look, all of this around it is all residential. And as we know, as humans, we give off pollution. So whether that's through stormwater systems, whether that's through runoff, or whether that's through fertilizers in our grass, anything like that is going to affect from 2011 to 2016. You can even kind of see that there's a more dense population in between. It's kind of harder to see in this picture, but that's some of the factors that we're going to get into in a little bit. So third and last one we're going to talk about here is the mangroves. So if you guys have seen mangroves, they're very, very charismatic kind of fauna where you can see these huge root systems. That's usually how people recognize them. They're a nursery habitat, erosion protection, and also storm protection. They're one of the best storm surge protections that we have naturally or artificially. A couple of threats that they have, legal removal and construction. One of the ways we can kind of see that a lot of times after hurricanes when people are removing trees and cutting them down. Unfortunately, that's a lot of the time that we get these people cutting down mangroves because they think that you're not really paying attention. You're just kind of doing your yard work. And yeah, just trimming, cutting without a permit. And you can also look for some excess sediment or dirt where it seemed like there was an area that used to be mangroves. Well, moving forward, we're talking about what's affecting the water pollution. That's affecting all three of these habitats that we talked about. As you can see in this picture, runoff is a huge issue. As much as nutrients are usually a good thing, and they sound like a good thing, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, and that's a lot of the problem that we're seeing here in Miami, here affecting Biscayne Bay. And one of those being nutrient pollution, just said that. Sediment, even though we have sediment in the water, or at the bottom of the water, we also have sediment that is coming in and is being excessive, which is also another issue. And oil and fuel pollution, which most people are familiar with already. Detergents, toxic chemicals, and we have two sources of pollution. We have point source and non-point source. So in an ideal world, we have all point source, right? You can see the person doing it, you can see the person dumping the pollution. We can see the business dumping the pollution, whatever it is, and we can kind of go after them that way. Unfortunately, what we have mostly here, just kind of throughout Miami and Broward, is non-point source pollution. So it's coming down these canals like we talked about earlier. It's coming down these waterways, maybe it's coming down the storm drains, maybe it's coming out of these outfalls like this, and we're trying to track it back to see really who's responsible, because at the end of the day, if we want to put forth litigation, everyone's going to point the finger at everyone else. Right here we have a algal bloom. This one is very intense. It's more of a green, and if you could smell this, I promise you'd walk out of the room. It's absolutely terrible. This is not only terrible for humans, it's also obviously terrible for the animals that live within it. One of the reasons that it's terrible is because all that algae on top is actually sucking up all the oxygen that's within the water. So there's about 0% dissolved oxygen in that water, and even to the point where fish will be gasping for air. So why does this happen? Why do we get these algal blooms? Why does this picture even exist? You can see it's an influx of nitrogen, phosphorus. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's in your fertilizer. If you can see that grass that's nice and green right up next door, I'm gonna take a guess here and say that a lot of that fertilizer had run off right into this canal, and it caused that excess nutrient load, therefore leading to an algal bloom. So algal bloom is one of these factors that can happen, then leading to fish kill. It can also smother the seagrass. As you know, seagrass is a plant, we just went over this, and they need sunlight to grow. You got no sunlight, obviously there's no sunlight penetrating through here. You have no seagrass. And also human health impacts, which isn't always the first thing that we think of, but this is actually harmful to humans as well. Sources. So we have fertilizer, kind of mentioned that beforehand. We have, and I'll talk about this in a second, within Miami-Dade, fertilizer throughout the rainy season. As we know, after 2 p.m. every single day, it's raining. We lived in Miami. If you lived in Miami long enough, it's going to happen. So not only are you wasting your money, you're wasting your fertilizer, and you're harming the bay. Because as soon as it rains, it's not had enough time to develop, to penetrate into that soil, give the plants what it needs, and it's just run right off and now ends up in the bay. We also are really trying to focus on the slow release and the no phosphorus. We're also trying to set back. So what setback means is just at least 20 feet from the water, from where the waterfront is. So we're gonna play a little video, and it'll kind of explain what I was explaining here, and just the journey that fertilizer takes.
Mr. Fertilizer is full of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, which is applied to our lawns and yards to help plants grow. However, during the summer months, we get lots of rain, which makes it hard for our plants to absorb Mr. Fertilizer. Instead, Mr. Fertilizer and his nutrients get washed away by stormwater into our storm drains and eventually outfalls that lead to canals, the bay, and to the ocean.
Let's start over.
In these water bodies, there are tiny plants called algae that love Mr. Fertilizer's nutrients, just like our lawns and plants do. So much so that the algae consume all his nutrients and grow and grow and grow. This can create what we call an algae bloom. Algae blooms are a problem because they clog our waterways, turn the water green, smell bad, can kill fish and wildlife, and can be harmful to people. You can do your part to prevent these blooms by using less fertilizer, not applying it anywhere near drains or waterways, and using it only when we know it isn't going to rain. In fact, you can skip the fertilizer completely during the rainy summer months. Help keep Mr. Fertilizer in our lawns and not our waterways.
The do's and don'ts. So like I said, we've been working on this, and we finally, as of April of last year, maybe some of you have seen it, we've actually banned the usage of fertilizer throughout the summer months, throughout the rainy season. That was, no easy task at all. So some of the guidelines here: don't fertilize it in the summer months, not using phosphorus, not fertilizing near a waterway or storm drain, and using the slow release nitrogen. So yeah, Fertilizer Ordinance passed. I mean, that was a huge water win for us, and now it's an awareness piece. So that's kind of where those three-pronged approaches follow through. Is the litigation goes, or the law goes through, and now it's educating, it's being out there, it's being aware of it, between garden clubs, anyone with a green thumb, people who are super passionate about this, people who are gardening, also the commercial fertilizers, all these type of people were working all together trying to get them aware of this new ordinance, and it's been successful so far. A little bit of what this video also talked about: why fertilizer problematic. Full of nutrients. Again, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So unfortunately, it's meant for things to grow. So once it gets into the water, it doesn't know that it's in the water. It just starts to grow whatever is in the water. Unfortunately, algae is going to be the first one to take that up. This can also, some of the nutrients might come from sewage leaks, pet waste as well, and septic tanks, and we'll get into those three in a little bit. And the bay, I forgot to mention, this is historically very low in nutrients. So this is just the opposite effect. And it's low in nutrients doesn't mean it's a bad thing. This is just how the typical ecosystem runs. These algal blooms, like we said, clog the waterways. It can lead to fish kills. It can lead to harms to human impact. It can lead to suffocation of the seagrass beds, suffocation of fish itself. And there's just a lot of things that can go into this. Like we said, some of the nutrient sources, animal waste. I hope you all are picking up after your pets, not only just kind of as a common courtesy. This is actually also affecting the environment, and this is affecting our waterways. Although that nutrient dumping can end up into the water and slowly cause a lot of issues. Now another one, which aren't necessarily your fault, are sewage and septic leaks. This one right here, I'll actually show you a video later on, was an active leak not too far away. And again, just to prevent this is regular maintenance of reporting leaks and smells, which you will all be empowered to do after this, to us, and we'll get those in the hands of the right people. Sewage leaks. So this one is actually off of Virginia Key. One of our reporters went down, saw something not quite right. Luckily, this was semi-treated according to the county, but what happened was this had been leaking and leaking over millions of gallons of effluent, and until we reported it, not only was the city made aware, they were already aware for over a year that this had been leaking. And now, since we put pressure on them, they actually plugged this and fixed it. So even though they were aware, sometimes it takes that extra step that brings that awareness. For us, as soon as we filed our intent to sue, we said, okay, we'll fix this, don't even worry. So that's what we're here for. And this came out of our Thousand Eyes program. Next one, promised you a video. This one was actually off of Oleta State Park. And as you can see, active sewage leak. These are raw sewage right off of Oleta State Park. One of our Thousand Eyes on the Water water patrollers was kayaking one day, smelled something not quite right, just kept paddling, whipped out his drone, and he found that it was actively leaking. Reported that to us. Unfortunately, again, that was over a 1 million gallon spill as well, but it was taken care of by the city or the county, can't remember who it was. But as you can see, it's in this pristine, if you haven't been to Oleta, I highly recommend it. It's something that no one would see as you're driving across the road. So again, we're relying on all of you as much as we'd want to be out on this water. This is really an empowering tool, and these are prime examples of the difference that you all can make. Septic, so we'll start talking about septic here. Does anyone know if they're on septic, just by chance? Yeah, maybe, sort of. It's okay if you are. It's not, again, no fault of yours. It's just something to be aware of. There's actually over 100,000 septic systems within Miami-Dade County. The way septic works, just to give you a quick overview, solids go through into the septic tank, liquids move into the drain field. It is filtered out through percolation, purification, and then the water ends up back in the aquifer that we drink from. Ideally, actually, you need 2 feet of soil to filter out this effluent, this liquid, to be considered safe for human consumption. Not sure if you guys have ever dug a hole here, but we don't really have 2 feet of soil. So that doesn't necessarily work here. And if you add onto that the rising sea levels, obviously that's not great. Here in this first one, we have a completely failed, this is going right into the aquifer off of that drain field. The second one, we don't have 2 feet already, so we're losing that purification. And if you're lucky enough to be, I guess you would be like on Mount Miami if you're living on the other one, and you're actually still getting that, that filtration. So lots of issues with that. And it's just unfortunate that these things were set in place way back, and we're still dealing with these issues now. So moving forward, another issue that we have here is sedimentation. We kind of talked about already, so I won't kind of go over it too much, but it's smothering. It's smothering corals. It's also smothering seagrasses as well, and they can also choke fish and contain harmful chemicals as well that can attach to the sedimentation. One of the running theories, if you guys have heard of the stony coral tissue loss disease, is it might be attached to the sediment, and the sediment is spreading throughout, and could it be why we have this stony coral tissue loss outbreak? So big issue. Again, what to look for is this milky light color. Some of you may have seen it. I'll have a video in the next slide that'll actually show you active sedimentation happening. It can be in a plume, and this also happens during rain, sometimes at construction sites. We actually had that not too long ago. Off of Brickell, they're supposed to have these control structures in place. Control structure broke, sedimentation got out. Again, we got this report, and we brought it up to the construction company. They ended up figuring it out, unfortunately after the fact, but it still did stop this sedimentation. So this is the Port of Miami dredging. On the left on this is Fisher Island, just to kind of place you. So this is active dredging. You can see the huge sediment plume that's kind of falling off on the left side of this barge. And if you kind of know where you're at, right on the other side, there's corals. So the coral reef runs not too far off. First reef is not even a mile off, actually, from where this is, from Fisher Island, and then from South Point Pier. And this is what smothered over 200 acres of coral during the Port of Miami dredging, which I believe was around 2014. So another video, you can see, I believe this was a construction site or dredging as well. You can see how milky that water is. Another report that we got. So unfortunate things happen, but luckily we get these reports from our reporters. And the next thing we're gonna talk about is oil and fuel contaminants. This one most people are gonna be familiar with. BP Gulf spill obviously being the biggest one. That's probably been most relevant in our lives right now, not too long ago. But what you're looking for is this rainbow sheen. Anytime it looks a little rainbowy, and you're gonna have several different colors. Sometimes the sheen is natural, but these rainbow colors is really what you're looking for, and they're often seen near marinas, near storm drains. Another thing not always thought of is detergents. So the detergents are, some can biodegrade, definitely look out for that, but these can be harmful for wildlife. They're meant to clean, they're meant to take all the bacteria away, even the healthy bacteria. They don't kind of parse out which ones are which. What you're looking for is bubbles, suds, foaming, and that's gonna be marinas, storm drains, or even near car washes. One of the tips that I try to give to everyone is wash your car, especially if you live near waterways, to wash your car over the grass. Let that filtration come through, and that will actually separate out this detergent and will be great for the bay. Toxic chemicals as well. Again, that rainbow type of sheen, this is harmful to humans and wildlife. I've seen it also near leaking dumpsters if you ever worked in the food service industry. Strange color, smell, and this is unfortunately also dumping into the storm drains. So again, dumpsters, storm drains, parking lots, looking for that rainbow type sheen as well. So here, this is what we would love the bay to look like, right? This is exactly what we'd like to see when we go out for our nice walk in the morning. Seeing the healthy wildlife living throughout. Obviously, we don't want to see this. This is actually a picture we got in 2020. With all the other mess of happening in 2020, we had a major fish kill. This was a report that got sent in August of 2020 to us. It seemed weird, obviously, at first, and we started getting more and more reports, and I'll show you that in a second. And we tried to figure out right away. We were out, kind of like a tactical team, looking for causes, looking if it's happening north of the point of this. What I say this is off of Morningside, so north and south of Morningside. How do we contain it? How do we get this cleaned up so it's not decomposing and taking up more oxygen? And this was another picture that we unfortunately got the next day through our app, and we kept seeing it more and more. Now, unfortunately, when we didn't get it to it in time, we had these algal blooms. So as they decompose, these bacteria come in, and we get an influx of nutrients, and then we get an algal bloom, and it's just kind of a vicious cycle that keeps going round and round, and it can cause another fish kill, and these things happen again in a vicious cycle. Obviously, this is not normal. This is not what we want to see. This is not at all what our bay is meant to be. And again, why did this happen? Pollution seems to be our best hypothesis and our best theory of why this is happening. So the excess nutrients kicked this off, and then as the fish kill went on, it got worse and worse. And this pollution came from 4 sources, it seems like to us: septic, sewer, stormwater, and fertilizer. So some of the things that we talked about as well. And if you see this picture, we have all of these things, imagine, going into the bay. What happens is the increase in algae and bacteria will bring down the low dissolved oxygen. It will end up as a fish kill, possibly. Then as those fish kills, as those fish decompose, we get an increase of nutrients and bacteria, and then we get the algal bloom, and it starts over again. So as you can see, vicious cycle. This was very bad. You'll see in a second all of our fish kill reports, so by the numbers. You can see this kind of hot spot. Those big circles for total reports is greater than 26, and all the other small spots. So you can see this was basically bay-wide. This is a timeline of our reports from our app. So it starts on Monday through Thursday. So 3 days later, we had the fish kill reports from up by Bow Harbor all the way down here to Key Biscayne. And it's unfortunate, but this is how quick it can happen. And that's how important it is for us to report these things. To the point where the dissolved oxygen was so low that we had boats out there aerating. We had fire Luckily, the fire rescue was out there pumping fresh water and just trying to get, there was fish, we had reports of gasping up above the water, just trying to get oxygen. And what we did out of this, we have our action alerts, so stopping sewage leaks, huge issue. We also have eliminating as many septic tanks, trying to get septic to sewer going, and enacting a fertilizer ordinance. That was one of the wins we talked about already. Storing and treating storm water is another huge issue. We have very old infrastructure here in Miami. Trying to flip it over, we have about 50 to 100-year-old infrastructure. We're trying to pump that money into it. We're trying to get our elected officials to care. This is something that really needs to be fixed. If you've ever been through a rainstorm and you've seen the streets of Brickell and you see the stuff coming the other way through the storm drains, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And all these issues, not to be doom and gloom, are things that we're going to see. So we're going to get into the empowering part, where all you fit into this equation. So our 1,000 Eyes on the Water, your role, again, observe, document, and report. Information is our most powerful tool. We mean that so much, and we need as much information as you can give us. Where are you at? What are the conditions like? What does it smell like? Are you seeing fish? Are you not seeing fish? Is there a lot of people around? Is there not a lot of people around? Is there construction happening? Is there landscaping happening? Is there a fertilizer truck nearby? All of these things are very important to us to figure out what's happening in the area around. And the great thing about when you report to us, we take care of all the heavy lifting. So when you report to us through our 1,000 Eyes on the Water app, it's actually called Swim Guide now. You'll see that little thing in the Google Play and App Store. We actually take it and we send it to the agencies that are in charge. So instead of figuring out what number do I have to call, was it the city, was it the state, was it the county, send it to us and we'll take care of that, and we already have our contacts there. All you gotta do is send it in. We also have our social media. Feel free to follow us, Miami Waterkeeper, on all the socials. Website as well as miamiwaterkeeper.org. One thing I always have to mention, safety first. The best way I can describe it is if someone's involved, if there's a company involved, you can do it from a distance. We don't want you to actively be engaged, actively get into fights. This is just something that we can handle, so feel free to report it, put the area you're at, even if there's businesses involved, maybe there's a county involved, maybe something else is involved. Just be safe out there. Do not go into territory that is private, obviously. Also don't, if there's, say, an algal bloom, don't go in the water. Just general safety and following all boating safety laws, any and all applicable laws. We're here to help you guys out. You guys are meant to be the eyes, not necessarily the brute in the fist. What to report, like I said before, water, weather, location, GPS coordinates are fantastic. Sometimes we'll get reports and it's just like, it was kind of by this road. And as much as that helps, the GPS coordinates, we can go right to the spot, see exactly what you're seeing, hopefully, and move forward from there. Pertinent details, like I said before, photo, video are critical. So if you have a photo phone, a video phone, like most of us all have right now, take a picture, you can upload it right to the app, it comes right to us. And timing matters as well. So as soon as you see that active spill, say you see that fish go, as soon as you can, send it to us. That way we get people out there, figure out what's going on. And then what's next for all of you, if you feel so inclined, is to download the Miami Waterkeeper app. Again, that's Swim Guide. There's also some really good information on there about the water quality that's around us, whether you should swim in the water or not. Follow us on the socials. You can even just send it right to us and we'll take care of that as well. And just go on water patrol. So next time you're walking, biking, maybe you're on a kayak one day, look out for those things. If you see something, say something. That's just the overall basis of this program. So thank you. Obviously our sponsor is very important. We appreciate them all for putting all of this on. 500 people, 1,000 eyes, one mission, and that's where all of us are at. Feel free to send me an email if you have questions. My email is at the bottom, and thank you for your time.
Question.
Yes.
So how many volunteers do you have right now for 1,000 Eyes on the Water? Do you have your 500? Or
Yeah, we have our 500. So we have more than 500. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I want to say we have actually over 600 now.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
over the 1,000 eyes.
And so, obviously, so the volunteers, they're keeping an eye on the the water, and if they see anything, they report it to you. Is Miami Waterkeeper involved in, other than like taking legal action when necessary, are you guys involved with any other groups, like environmental groups, that actually like take action to do cleanup or anything like that also?
Yeah, so just to repeat your question, we are involved with several other organizations, so whether that's with the city, with the governmental agencies, with the non-governmental agencies, with the nonprofits. Let's take the fish kill, for example. We were out there, we had our people out there actually cleaning up the fish, getting it out, in contact with fire rescue, aerating it out. We had, even some of our people out there with their boats and aerating the water. So, and these are things that, again, it's one fight. We should all be in this together. So we really emphasize these networks and change of communication.
I also read, I know that some of the labs at Rasmus were doing research to see like what was actually causing that fish kill. And I mean, broadly, it's because of algal blooms. But I remember them saying that it was hydrogen sulfide, I think, that was released by the algae.
Yeah.
That was really causing a lot of the problems.
Yes.
What do you know about that?
So as far as the pure chemistry, I don't know a ton about it, but I did hear the hydrogen sulfide thing as well, and that seems to be a major player in this as well. I don't know if we've come to a final conclusion, but the results are clear, is that these things are not coming from natural sources. These are excess nutrients that are coming through us throughout. Yes?
There's a question here. How will the work of Miami Waterkeepers help us across the state of Florida?
Yes, so we I guess I'll give two answers to this question. So as waterkeepers, we are invested in our water, and we're talking with other waterkeepers as well. So there's waterkeepers throughout the state. There's some in St. John's, there's some over in Tampa, and we try to be the pillar and try to be the spearhead. We have a very interesting, I guess to say the least, ecosystem and population here in Miami. A lot of people living near a lot of water. So what we do here, we can spread throughout, and unfortunately things happen very quickly here, and we hope that we can actually communicate our findings, communicate our actions, our successes, and sometimes even more importantly our failures throughout the state of Florida to the elected officials, even at the state level as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
That's all I have.
No. Okay.
Actually, I do have a
Go ahead.
Our family in the past 3 years went from septic to sewage.
Okay.
And our septic tank never had any problems for the 30-something years that we've had it. But when we switched over to sewage, every time there's a high tide, there's a strange smell coming from our bathrooms, and only from our bathrooms.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's normal or not, but it's only during high tide.
How close are you to the water, roughly?
I mean, I live here on Key Biscayne.
Okay. So
Yeah, so I'm basically on the water.
So, and take this with a grain of salt. I'm, no septic expert here, but what I'm thinking is there could be still a possible piping system that's connected to septic that could just, as like we saw, if I could find it way back, is that rise in sea level is pushing up that water and unfortunately kind of infiltrating into that old septic tank. And what I'm thinking is the smells are coming out because of that. This is what I think is happening during high tide. This could be your septic system, just as the groundwater has come up, and it could be pushing that smell back up into. Again, that would just be a question for a septic professional, or even the city or the county, whoever you dealt with, to switch over to that. Definitely a question for them for sure. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Any others? No? Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.
Thanks for coming.
Yes.